Hi everybody. So I was going through the raw footage for the video I posted recently entitled "Rush Limbaugh is not Louis C.K." and I realized that I actually talked in the full raw video. I just went on forever. I think I talked for like half an hour, and I cut about 13 minutes of that out just to make to make the finished video somewhat palatable. But a lot of the material that I cut out, even though it didn't fit into the finished video that I posted, um, was still all right. Was still pretty good, and had some, I felt, decent points to make. So I'm going to show you some of that now. I just wanted to bookend it a little, so you know exactly what it is you're looking at. This is more to do with Mark Levin and Louis C.K. and the Rush Limbaugh situation, mostly to do with Mark Levin and Louis C.K. So let's take a look at this. It's an outtake, I guess you could call it. Some outtakes from the Rush Limbaugh Louis C.K. video. Mark Levin also said that he had no idea who Louis C.K. was, and he'd never heard of him. And Mark Levin does this a lot. He likes to denigrate his ideological opponents, his targets, the victims of his bilge, by denigrating their status, by saying that they're less famous than he is, or that he's never even heard of them. You know, I remember a couple years ago he had a fracas on the air with David Frum, who's one of the smartest Republicans that you'll ever read. He's a really sharp commentator, and he wrote a really good commentary about this Limbaugh thing on CNN. You should look that up if you're interested in reading it. And Frum was and is a critic of right-wing talk radio because he rightly, to my way of thinking, views it as an embarrassment to serious people in the Republican Party who would like to see the party become a more serious political entity and not just pander to the Tea Party and pander to just the base instincts of its constituents. And David Frum appeared on Mark Levin's radio show to discuss these things with Levin, who he had criticized. And one of the first things that Levin asks him, instead of engaging with with David Frum's arguments and trying to make points against him and engage him in a conversation and a debate, Mark Levin asks him questions like, "Well, how many copies of your book did you sell?" And David Frum was honest. He said, "I don't know, maybe 10,000 or so." I mean, not a huge number. Mark Levin, I think, had just published his book, Liberty and Tyranny, which had been this huge bestseller, and all of the right-wing radio listeners ran out and bought it, and it was at the top of the bestseller list. And and Mark Levin was not shy at all about rubbing this in David Frum's face, as though the mere fact that his book had sold more copies than David Frum's book meant that there was more validity to his ideas than David Frum's ideas. And Mark Levin does this all the time. He's constantly bragging on his education, on his own intelligence, and I always think of something that my mother-in-law says occasionally, that self-praise is cheap praise. I wonder if Mark Levin has ever heard that before. Since you've never heard, or you've forgotten that you've ever heard of Louis C.K., let me just tell you a few things about him. And maybe you'll see why, like Bill Maher, there is no comparison between Louis C.K. and Rush Limbaugh. Louis C.K. is one of, if not the most acclaimed and most important writers and performers of comedy in probably the last 25 years. He's won Emmy Awards for comedy writing. He's won Grammys for comedy albums. His show, his TV show on FX, Louis, goddamn, is like far and away the best thing on TV. Period. I mean, if you've never watched Louis on FX, the fucking thing is just jaw-droppingly brilliant. It's not just a funny show. It's one of the most meaningful and deep and insightful pieces of television you've ever seen. I mean, I've watched episodes of that show where when the episode is over, I have to sort of look around and think for a second and think, did I actually fucking watch that? That's how good that show is. And it's not just good because it's funny. It's good because it's thoughtful. That's what makes it special. It's one of the rare television shows that is actually thoughtful, that actually tries to think about things and tries to say things about aspects of our life and of our existence that are meaningful and that are insightful and that are true and that are unique to the person saying them. It's a brilliant show, and it's not just a repository of left-wing ideology. It's an incredibly thoughtful show. It's the sort of thing where it's like an episode. One of the episodes has Louis, who plays a version of himself on the show, getting into a fist fight with a friend of his who is another stand-up comedian, Nick DiPaolo, who's more right-wing than Louis is. And they get into this argument over what DiPaolo says about Barack Obama being an affirmative action president, and Louis calls Nick a Nazi repeatedly, and they get into this big fist fight, and Nick hurts his hand, and Louis takes him to the hospital, and they sit in the emergency room, and they sort of, review their friendship and talk about each other's marriages, and it's clear that they have a great affection for each other, and that despite their fight and despite their disagreement, they're really good friends, and they really like each other, and that both of them are good guys, are not bad people, just because they have different opinions about things politically. And it seems like a really basic thing that we should all just know, but in this incredibly polarized political culture that we live in the United States, that's actually a really meaningful thing to say, because we don't get that message from very much of our media. Most of the time we're not told that, well, people who disagree with you don't necessarily have to be assholes. They can be good people that just see things differently than you. That's like a revolutionary message lately. It shouldn't be, but it is. And for Louis C.K. to say that in his show, and to portray himself as the left-leaning character, as the instigator and the guy who sort of is more of the asshole who starts the fight. I mean, you can't say that he's just some liberal guy who's just, got an axe to grind. I mean, he does a great bit in his recent show that, his special that he taped at the Beacon Theater, where he talks about how soldiers are so great on airplanes. When a soldier is on an airplane, it's like they're so polite and so helpful. They'll help people put their bags up in the overhead compartment, and they're always just so kind and polite and giving to people. And Louis C.K. says, the soldier is sitting up in coach and I'm in first class, and I always think I should give that guy my seat. He deserves it more than I do, because he's going off to war, he's going to fight and to maybe get killed or have to kill somebody, and I'm just a comedian, and I should give that guy my seat. And I never do, and I never have, and I've never even seriously even come close to doing it, but I feel like I should. So he uses that not only to make a comment about the soldier, but about himself and about his own shortcomings and his own attitudes. So there you go. That's the end of the material that you haven't seen from that point on. It's stuff that was in the previously posted video. So anyway, just wanted to share. Never let it be said that I ever pass up an opportunity to publicly fillet Louis C.K.